the fourth entry in our new series, The Great Movies, Quentin Tarantino's 1994 masterpiece, Pulp Fiction.
Did I break your concentration?
Get down, get down.
You got a corpse in a car, minus the head in the garage. Take me to it.
Don't you hate that?
Hate what?
Uncomfortable silences.
John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Amanda Plummer, Maria de Medeiros, Bing Rames, Eric Stoltz, Rosanna Arquette, Christopher Walken, and Bruce Willis.
Looking at something, friend?
Yeah, my friend looking. Die, you mother!
A new film directed by Quentin Tarantino.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for joining me here on this, hopefully, happy hump day in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today will mark the fourth entry in our continuing series simply called The Great Movies. And just as a quick refresher, the first three films that I classify as great movies, only one of them would have widespread approval of my designation, that being Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The other two films are John Dahl's Rounders and Gary Ross's amazing Pleasantville. Oddly enough, both of those movies from a very strong movie year of 1998. Rounders came out later in the year, and so did Pleasantville, memory serves. They were both released in the fall, or in that ballpark. But today's movie, I'm going to get to use a poster. Actually, I'm going to get to use two posters. Today's movie is Quentin Tarantino's 1994, virtually unquestioned masterpiece, Pulp Fiction. Now, when I started New York University Film School, there were already rumblings about this movie. The internet was still in its infancy in 1994, but Pulp Fiction took the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival 30 years ago. I think Cannes went off in April or May of 1994. I'm not 100% on that. But I had not seen Quentin's debut film, Reservoir Dogs, even though Reservoir Dogs had premiered at the Sundance Film Festival quite some time prior. Information not only travels slowly, but it's nothing like now where if you hear of a movie, you just go see it. You need a distribution channel. Was it released on VHS? There are all kinds of processes that needed to take place. My memory is that I had heard of Quentin Tarantino when Pulp Fiction won at the Cannes Film Festival, but I had not, to that point, seen Reservoir Dogs. By the time my first semester at New York University commenced, the end of August, right around this time, in 1994, I had seen Reservoir Dogs, and I thought it was unbelievable. I was almost in awe, even though a number of people told me, you have to see this movie. Well, Blockbuster doesn't carry it. I don't care. You have to see this. You will not believe this movie. So I had seen Reservoir Dogs. And then I read that Pulp Fiction winning the Palme d'Or, the top prize at the 94 Cannes Film Festival, was a real unusual thing to take place for an American film to win the top award at Cannes. As luck would have it, although there was nothing lucky about this from either end, either the selection of the jury chairperson that year or that said jury chairperson championed Pulp Fiction as being the best film that he saw, and that it was the best film anyone saw during the 1994 in competition portion of the Cannes Film Festival. The chairman of the jury at Cannes that year was Dirty Harry himself. You can read his name, Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood was dazzled by Pulp Fiction, as were other members of the jury. But Clint pushed hard for it to get the top prize. And it's one reason why Tarantino himself has always had, he's always liked Clint. I'm sure he would get along with him anyway, one filmmaker to another. And Quentin, being somebody who loves movie stars, he became a Sylvester Stallone fan from the days of the Lords of Flatbush. Like, he knew who Stallone was when most people considered him an unknown with the release of Rocky and the success and all of that. But Quentin, as somebody who loves the concept of movie stardom, he was a Clint guy. Imagine the flex, knowing that somebody that you were just a fan of as a film geek kid, and then a guy working in a video store, thought your movie was a masterpiece. And I don't know what his idea was or ideas were as far as Reservoir Dogs. I have no idea. I just know Pulp Fiction. So with it winning at Cannes, and me starting New York University Film School not that many months later, I was ready to see it, and I was excited to see Pulp Fiction. And I think that it was released in the United States sometime in September or October, but I'm going to double check on this because this is very important. But while I do that, before I forget, Pulp Fiction is streaming free on Amazon Prime. There are also other platforms. And as far as, October 14th was when it was first released in the United States. It doesn't specify whether that was a blanket release or limited. I don't know. But what I do know is Pulp Fiction only cost between $8 and $9 million to produce as far as the actual mechanics of the production. It cost an additional 10 to market it here in the States and overseas. And the film ended up grossing more than $200 million, half of which came from the overseas market, which is an absolutely staggering sum. So it was an immediate hit. And in large part, it wasn't because it won the Palme d'Or. That's not why people went to see it. People went to see it because the teasers, the trailer for the film, the TV spots, suggested a movie experience that we had not seen before, even if we had watched Reservoir Dogs. So this film is considered, technically it's a crime thriller, but Reservoir Dogs is also technically a crime thriller. And Michael Mann's Heat, starring Big Al and Bobby D, is also technically a crime thriller. If Pulp Fiction is a crime thriller, 30 years later, it is still unlike any crime thriller ever made. To me, the film is not quantifiable. It does not fit any particular genre. It has elements of a lot of genres. It even has elements of the Western. It has elements of the private eye story, the way Tarantino deliberately echoes Robert Aldrich's 1955. Was it Sam Spade? Philip Marlowe? No, Mickey Spillane's. It was Mickey Spillane. What was the character, though? Hold on. Mickey Spillane. Mike Hammer. Oh, man, that's embarrassing. I remembered it before I Googled it. The character of Mike Hammer, he wasn't the kind of the knight in shining armor that either Sam Spade or the other characters in that ballpark, Philip Marlowe, were. Mike Hammer was kind of a scumbag. But Kiss Me Deadly, where I was going with that, there is a briefcase very similar to the briefcase, Marcellus Wallace briefcase, in Pulp Fiction. It is a deliberate homage to that. And to the idea, the mystery that can't really be solved. What's in the briefcase? The next year in Seven, we had Brad Pitt screaming, "What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?" Pulp Fiction is so many different kinds of films at once while just being its own unique entity. It has a non-linear structure, which is usually box office poison, if we're being honest about it. It's normally not something that, oh yeah, great idea. But Tarantino and his co-writer helped to work on the script. Roger Avery, who had a pretty good career in his own right. He did a movie that a lot of people absolutely adore called Killing Zoe not long after Pulp Fiction. But they decided to break the film up into individual stories and not worry about confusing audiences with a non-linear structure. It works incredibly well. And Roger Ebert, the late great film critic who I always mention, when Ebert saw Pulp Fiction, he said something And then he saw it again and again and again, multiple times. But Ebert said, one of the great things about Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, which also has a nonlinear structure, Ebert said, as many times as I've seen Citizen Kane, if you drop me into a particular moment, it will take me time to figure out where we are, either chronologically or how far into the movie are we, or both, and usually both. Pulp Fiction, if you drop me into the film, I don't immediately know where we are. And it is to the film's credit that I have to recalibrate and say, okay, this moment is from the Bonnie situation, or this moment is from The Gold Watch. But Pulp Fiction got me excited, and many other film geeks, and many other just movie fans when we saw that, how incredible the cast was. The reviews were off the charts. And I understand there's still going to be a segment of movie fans in 2024, and I'm not taking shots at you, that say, fuck the critics. I understand that. Fucking suck. Fine. Generally speaking, if every film critic, with very few exceptions, loves a movie, it's going to be a work of quality. You may not spark to it in particular, but it will be a work of quality. And how we react to movies, how movies work or don't work, is specific to us. But for me, at age 50, historically, there are no quote-unquote great movies. There are no movies with widespread critical acclaim which I saw and said, this movie is terrible. I might say it didn't work for me. I'm not the biggest fan of Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull and or Goodfellas, but I can appreciate how brilliant they are. I just don't enjoy those movies the way I do much of Scorsese's other great films. And I can sit here and tell you that I think The Age of Innocence is better than both Goodfellas or Raging Bull, and you'll be like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. That's also fine. Maybe I don't. But my reactions are mine alone, is the point. And there are some people, Pulp Fiction just never works for them. But seeing the reviews, seeing the intensity of the Siskel and Eberts, of the David Denbys, of the major critics, all hitting the ceiling saying, this is incredible. Well, of course I was going to go see it. So my dad and I, we actually saw it in Comac at the now long, dearly departed, 13 and a half years gone, Comac Multiplex, which used to be just off of, for you Long Islanders, just off of LIE Exit 53. I think there's a Lowe's there now. Not good. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Lowe's, but that was a pretty cool movie theater. I saw a lot of big films there. Even living in Huntington, used to go there because they often got films that played in limited release, which Pulp Fiction may have been at the time. So I went in with an idea of what the movie was about, but I wasn't really on the internet yet. And to the credit of the leading film critics and people who had seen it already and talked about it in print, whether it was Premiere Magazine or Entertainment Weekly, I went in spoiler-free. And that's something that's really difficult to do today because you're going to have advanced screenings, and it's so easy to get spoilers on the internet, and people will spoil it just to be trolls. I can't believe they drove that car off the cliff at the end. Hey, fuck you. I won't tell you what movie I just spoiled. First time through, watching Pulp Fiction. The movie is about 2 hours and 40 minutes. It seemed to be over in 90 minutes. That is how intensely gripping, involving, engaging, edge of your seat. It's not a suspense film, but I was like this for the entire running time. The stylistic choice of opening the film with Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer boosting the coffee shop, not realizing that 2 hours and 20 minutes or whatever it is later, we're going to return to that coffee shop, not realizing who was actually in that coffee shop while they were boosting it. Oops, Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta. Now that you know, spoiler alert, you can see John Travolta at the beginning of that movie. He's on his way to take his crap, literally. You don't even need to be an eagle-eyed viewer. You see John Travolta in the background during one of the cutaways to Tim Roth, going to take a shit. The genius of Quentin Tarantino. Didn't make a big thing of it. That's the kind of thing that I would probably be spot like, hey, look how clever I am. No, he didn't even bother with it. He just threw that out there. Wondering if audiences, maybe he didn't even wonder, are they going to actually think to look, did I tease it? Did I show Travolta and or Samuel Jackson at the very beginning of the movie? I don't know. But the way that scene ends, I'll execute every last one of you motherfuckers, and then we get into the movie proper. And chronologically, the sort of jumbled sequence allows for weird moments where a certain very important character is bumped off, and then he kind of seems to rise from the dead because of the structure. And we say to ourselves, what's the last thing that takes place chronologically? It's a movie that always plays and is replayed in your mind and in your memory. And in an overwhelming majority of cases, and people I know, there are certain films that even if they're not happy films, there are certain films that make us smile. Pulp Fiction, to me, and a lot of people that I associated with when I was in film school at this time, the time that the movie came out and the few years afterwards, this is a movie that makes people smile. And I believe they're smiling at the memory of the first time they saw it, having it make such a deep impression. And I'm not going into any more spoiler territory other than the fact that, and here are the opinions, right? I'm putting on my film critic hat now, even though this has nothing to do with that. I believe that Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary should have shared the award for screenplay. Well, actually, Tarantino went up there and he won for screenplay. Tarantino should have won Best Director and Pulp Fiction should have won Best Picture. There, I said it. I love Forrest Gump, and I really am an enormous fan, as are so many of you, of The Shawshank Redemption. I think that Shawshank of those three films is the most rewatchable, but I believe that Pulp Fiction is the best of those films. Now, as far as my history with those movies, I saw Forrest Gump when it opened in, I believe, July of 1994. Loved it. Fantastic. I understand it's problematic. And yeah, if you want to argue the political messages and the themes and what is it saying about Nixon and Johnson and Reagan, I can debate that with you. No problem. But I personally don't see the film as problematic as other people. I have studied it. I have watched it. I can take it apart and put it back together as much as the next guy. But I'm also able to say it is a very effective piece of cinema. I think the film is terrific. It hasn't aged badly. There are certain things that Zemeckis would probably have shifted slightly, but hey, that's part of it. Tarantino doesn't give a fuck. He probably wouldn't change a single frame of Pulp Fiction. So, he's not really into censoring himself. No, I made my movie. I made my movie. Let the art speak for itself. That's what he would say. Shawshank, I saw third of the all-timers that were released in 1994. Because Shawshank, obviously I'll do an episode of the great movies on that film, because Shawshank, spoiler alert, I believe is a great movie. Shawshank bombed. It was released September 23rd, 1994. So not long after Gump and before Pulp Fiction landed here in October of 94. But nobody, in this case, including me, nobody saw Shawshank in its initial theatrical run. It fucking bombed. It didn't find its audience until the Oscar nominations were announced in February of 1995, and all of a sudden, it gets a ton of Oscar nominations out of nowhere. That's when I saw it. And after seeing Pulp Fiction, I thought that Forrest Gump had been the third best film of 1994. So you get that part out of the way. I believe that Tarantino should have won picture and director for Pulp Fiction. I was okay with the fact that Tom Hanks won Best Actor over Travolta. I love John Travolta. But if we're auditing the Academy Awards, Travolta didn't even get nominated for what I believe to be his finest film acting, his most commanding performance, his greatest movie star performance other than Saturday Night Fever, which he probably should have won for that, Get Shorty the following year. I am way higher on Travolta's performance as Chili Palmer in Get Shorty than I am as Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. So I'm okay with the fact that, He didn't win for that. And I'm okay with the fact that Uma didn't win supporting actress. I love Uma. If anything, Uma had a greater claim on supporting actress award because she's the co-star for huge chunks of that film. I think she's great. But Pulp Fiction is a film that you can always revisit and find something new. It has such a vibrancy, such a sense of still feeling fresh after all of these years and times you've seen it. The moments in the film that make you cringe versus the moments that make you laugh out loud. And Quentin was able to, vis-a-vis the notorious Harvey Weinstein, but he was able to assemble such an incredible cast, getting Christopher Walken to basically do his Christopher Walken for the Gold Watch, and Harvey Keitel, who he had already worked with and was so good in Reservoir Dogs. Tim Roth also. Tim Roth as Mr. Orange in Reservoir Dogs, home run casting. Even though history tells us, and this is another great story, that when Quentin Tarantino wrote the screenplay for what became Reservoir Dogs, he did not write Mr. Orange with Tim Roth in mind, because who the fuck is Tim Roth? He may have written Mr. White thinking of Harvey Keitel, but he wrote Mr. Orange, and in the fantasy world in which he had the ability to pick up a phone and get anybody, he wrote Mr. Orange for James Woods. And the apocryphal story, which I think is not apocryphal, I think it's true, is that Quentin Tarantino, he was at the 1991 Sundance Film Festival. And James Woods screened the film, and he loved it. And he supposedly, talked to a couple of people and says, is there any way, can you introduce me to the kid? I'd love to meet this guy, meaning Quentin Tarantino. And he was able to meet him, and he said, I've never heard of you before, but that was one of the best movies I've ever seen. Whatever he says, something like that. He said, if there's ever anything that I can work with you going forward, count me in. You don't have to, I'll do it for nothing. He said something like that. Tarantino couldn't resist it. He told Woods, I had your agent was called about this project, and I don't know what happened. Did you not like the script? Woods' agent turned down Harvey Keitel, who had called on behalf of Quentin Tarantino to try to get the script to James Woods, who was on the A-list at the time. The apocryphal story is that James Woods fired his agent on the spot. He was so pissed off, they didn't even have the opportunity to take a look at what became Reservoir Dogs. But yeah, Tarantino just blew up immediately. He wrote the script for what became True Romance. His script is considered to be, by many people, to be better than the movie that Tony Scott made, but a lot of people love that movie. And he wrote the screenplay for what became Natural Born Killers, which was released in the United States at right around the same time as Pulp Fiction. And it's unfortunate that two geniuses like Quentin Tarantino and Oliver Stone, they had a falling out over Natural Born Killers. Each guy thinks the other fucked up. Stone thinks that Tarantino's script was humongously flawed and that he made the best movie he could. Tarantino says, words to the effect of, I love Oliver, but I think he fucked up my script. He hasn't said the same, never said the same about Tony Scott. I think Quentin is a fan of True Romance. But Pulp Fiction, the way that it plays, the way the actors all give their best. Bruce Willis had a weird year in 1994. He started off with Color of Night, just an awful kind of a murder mystery set in like a psychoanalyst, the world of a psychoanalyst. The movie's just completely fucked up. And Jane March, the actress, it was bad. That movie played at Cannes, and I think there was an NC-17 version. And Bruce Willis, while he was promoting Pulp Fiction, was taking a lot of heat because he showed the full Monty, and like the movie said, nobody told us anything about the full Monty. But Bruce also, just to show that he could be versatile, and I know that we all love Bruce Willis. He's one of Gen X's guys, no doubt about it. But there is an idea that Bruce gave the same performance in a lot of movies. Hey, movie stars give movie star performances. But if you look at 1994, you look at what Bruce did in Color of Night, for as much acting as he could do. But look what he does as Butch in Pulp Fiction. And then compare that to another film that came out in the fall of 94, Robert Benton's Nobody's Fool, with Melanie Griffith and Paul Newman in his last Best Actor, one of his last lead roles. Bruce is fucking great in Nobody's Fool. He's better than, in my opinion, he is in Pulp Fiction, because his character actually has some shadings to it. He's a very interesting character in Nobody's Fool, but it's terrific film acting in that movie and in Pulp Fiction. Bruce, even if his line readings are similar, you get the sense that these are much different characters with different goals. And Maria de Medeiros as Bruce's girlfriend in Pulp Fiction, she's so good. Love Amanda Plummer, love Tim Roth, really the whole cast. Everyone's great, from Ving Rhames on down. Even in a really small role, Eric Stoltz, who 9 years earlier was the original Marty McFly before they were able to get Michael J. Fox, who unfortunately didn't even have the opportunity to turn it down. And then when he finally was given the opportunity because Stoltz was not working out particularly well as Marty McFly, got fired. Doesn't happen that often in Hollywood when a name actor gets canned, and not because they were fighting or had an issue with the director, but simply because the movie's not working. There's a better movie to be made from this script. We're not getting it with this guy. But it is true that Pulp Fiction more than jump-started Tarantino's career, because all the other movies that I was mentioning, he was already on his way. But it made him an iconic figure almost overnight. So many people saw that movie in theaters and told their friends, you have to see this. Just as, to a much lesser extent, people told me, at least a half a dozen people, that I had to rent Reservoir Dogs. You will not believe this movie. A crime thriller, a crime thriller. Now, if I'm asked, though, from a broader sense, what is my Quentin Tarantino top three? I'm still going to take the two, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and I love Kill Bill. I wish that Quentin had been able to release the whole bloody saga, the whole bloody affair, whatever it is that he calls it. But it's 4 hours. And once again, begrudgingly, have to give Harvey Weinstein credit from the producer angle that Quentin was willing to try to cut a half hour. And Weinstein said, no, this is all perfect. I don't want you to cut a frame. We'll have to release it in 2 parts, but don't touch this film. And Harvey Weinstein was a guy, he'd go to hacking if he had to. He would take the film from the filmmaker if he thought he had to. He thought that what Quentin presented in, which was about 4 hours, was perfect. I think that Kill Bill, if taken as one movie, is the 3rd best movie that Quentin ever made, with Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs being 1 and 1A. Reservoir Dogs is almost perfect. It's so lean and efficient and so beautifully acted. Again, even Tarantino, who's not the best actor, he's good in that movie. Michael Madsen, man, stuck in the middle with you. Talk about a song in a movie, having a permanent identification. When you hear Stuck in the Middle of You with You by Steelers Wheel, you think of Michael Madsen torturing the cop. Marvin Nash, great name. That was the name of the cop. Pulp Fiction, whether you like it or not, is a great movie. Just as I don't really like Raging Bull. I don't enjoy it, even though I'm a boxing fan. But Raging Bull is a great movie. And Goodfellas, which is very difficult for me to sit through, it's very uncomfortable, is a great movie. Pulp Fiction has moments that make us uncomfortable, but I don't find it to be an uncomfortable film to sit through. Unnerving? Yes, but not uncomfortable. And I remember leaving the theater that October night in 1994 feeling exhilarated because I had seen something I had never seen before. And a moment in the movie when we realize that we're in the same coffee shop, that Samuel Jackson and John Travolta are in the same coffee shop. Holy shit. These two imbeciles are going to boost this place with stone cold killers sitting 40 feet away. Holy fuck. That is a moment that gives me goosebumps just to think about. The end of the Truman Show, when Jim Carrey, his final bow, is another moment that always gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And when a movie can give you goosebumps, doesn't even have to be the ending scene, but a movie that can give you that much of a visceral reaction, that's something that can't be bottled up. Otherwise, everybody would do it. And those are really the only 2 moments in movies that I get the goosebumps, just because of how powerful an individual, or brilliant in the case of Pulp Fiction, because in Truman Show, it's how powerful it is. Jim Carrey's final bow. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. But in this case, it's the understanding, holy shit, we've been building towards this for the last 2 hours and 20 minutes. Pulp Fiction, entry number 4 in our continuing series of the Great Movies, directed by, written by, along with Roger Avery, Quentin Tarantino, and starring John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Eric Stoltz, just going through this, Tim Roth, Bruce Willis, Amanda Plummer, Maria de Medeiros, and a fire Ving Rhames as Marcellus Wallace, Mia Wallace, that's Uma's character, husband, the big boss. We think he's the big bad, but he's really not. This has been episode number 292 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for spending some of this, hopefully, happy hump day with me here in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes or Podbean or Amazon Music, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.